crack of lightning would rip across the night sky, as a bolt of pure energy and thunder would cause the ground to splinter, flames leaping up and licking nearby trees. So, is it really this place? I find it hard to believe. The mana in the air here is already so thick. Have the rulers really been active that much? Or have we made some sort of mistake? Frost Monarch, quit your whining. The man's tone was gruff, as if his vocal cords had been rubbed by sandpaper. The streaks of light across the night sky would reveal his form. His eyes golden and slit-like. His body large and covered with swaths of fur, visible under the lightning's glow. The one called the Frost Monarch's spine would straighten. His excited casual demeanor had left. Why, if it isn't the Monarch of Beasts, what a pleasure it is to see you in the corporeal world once again. But no, on the contrary, simply based off his tone, anyone could discern that these two monarchs simply did not get along. The Beast Monarch would lumber forward, the Frost Monarch quickly stepping out of the way, his pale skin moving like a blur, as if though a flash through the rain and the storm. The man with his golden eyes would narrow them, raising his hand and peering between his thumb and index finger, gazing toward a sea of lights. Below the hill, he would see it. A rounded stone city, built in the shape of almost a perfect circle, and at the center, a tower that loomed into the heavens, a structure so glorious and filled with mana, so much mana coursed through the structure, it was clear that it must contain an incredible power. Well, Beast Monarch, is that all denizens of chaos within the tower? If you'd give me a moment, I could tell you. How about you shut up and let me do my job? The Frost Monarch would make a mild grunting sound. I don't understand why he would have acted so soon. Is the Monarch of Destruction so certain that— What the hell? What, is it the Shadow Monarch? No, but I can sense it. Deep underground, under that stone tower that pierces the sky. I can see traces of a powerful mana from the kin of the Monarch of Destruction. A dragon? Here? Why? The Monarch of Destruction didn't tell us anything about— You know as well as I do, Frost Monarch. The Monarch of Destruction only tells us what we must know. The Beast Monarch would smile. And since he didn't ask us to report anything outside of the Shadow Monarch's whereabouts, I don't think we even need to tell him about it. The Frost Monarch's mouth would hang open. You can't mean to not tell him of his own child being trapped under that structure by humans. Frankly, I'm not even sure most of them are humans. The Frost Monarch would turn, walking next to the Beast Monarch and glaring through the rain. Yes, I see what you mean. It's peculiar how many of them have some essence of a spiritual body. But yeah, seems like that trace of power from the Shadow Monarch's all but vanished. Nothing big enough to stand out anymore, at least. But then you think he was here? Of course he's here. The real problem is why he's going back on the plan. If that piece of shit Ashbourne already started making his move before the rulers even arrived, then we'll have wasted our time here. You don't think the Shadow Monarch's betrayed us now, do you? I hope he has. If that bastard betrayed us, I'll rip him apart myself. Boom. Crack. With a flash of lightning and the sound of thunder tolling, the trunk under which the two monarchs once stood would teeter forward, falling and rumbling into the ground. As the dust clears, the two figures would have vanished, disappearing into the stormy night. Hey everyone, and welcome back to What If Belle Cranel had the system from Solo Leveling, Level 9. If you're unfamiliar, please check out the top upper right hand corner, or in the description you'll find the playlist with every prior part, or level for my video game inclined fans, where we've had the opportunity to watch Belle climb up the ranks, take down gods, and even come face to face with death more times than he can count, all in the pursuit of becoming the strongest. And so, without further ado, if you haven't already, please hit all the cool shiny buttons down there, you know, the like, the bell, and the red button, and of course there's a new one, I think, called the hype button. I'm not entirely too sure what it does, but hey, maybe press that a few times, I don't know. But let's get into the story where we left off. Belle would sit up in his bed, a cold sweat covering him. The thin magical thread of connection between himself and the shadow soldier he had left in her shadow would snap, severing. He could not provide more mana through the gate to his soldier. It had been destroyed. What? Bell had no idea this limitation existed, that there was a range of distance that he had to maintain in order to continue to revive his soldiers. It felt like a stabbing pain in his heart, like a comrade he had known for years had just vanished. It was one of the soldiers he had first ever revived using onwards after he had done the job change quest and met Ikelos. I had no idea. But before he could think about the consequences of these actions, let the weight hit him. He'd realized what must have happened. She's in danger. We need to go now. Bell and his soldiers would sound the alarm, waking up Welf, Lily, as well as Essel. As Bell scrambled to pull on his gear, he'd tell them what was going on, saying his soldier he had left with Wiene had vanished, the last of its will reaching him before it had been destroyed. He grit his teeth, rage beginning to fill him now that he realized truly what had happened. I promised I would protect her. There's no way I'm going back on my word, no matter what. The doors of the mansion of the Cranel Familia would slam open, the wind and rain pouring into the foyer. Ikelos would cringe a little. They'd run through, slamming the doors shut behind them. Bell would summon forth 2 shadow soldiers, 2 beast shadows, hellhounds from his own. His shadow would expand, and 2 dog-like creatures would form out of the liquid shadow. Lily and Welf would saddle on top as the dogs began running. Bell would turn to Essel, nodding as the 2 would begin their sprint on foot. The 2 of them would be far faster on their own legs. Within minutes, even under the storm clouds, Bell and his party would arrive to the center of Orario. It was almost 3 o'clock in the morning, and so the guards who would be stationed would be in a sleep-like state. As they'd open their eyes blurrily, the 2 Xenos Familia members would see only a blur of white and shadow. The Cranel Familia infiltrating the dungeon almost silently. As they enter through the top floor, Bell would say that he'll clear the path. As monsters would begin to spawn inside the dungeon, now appearing from around corridors, he'd simply use Ruler's hand, snapping their necks as soon as they appeared. Magic stones would begin to litter the ground, but they'd ignore them. Bell didn't have time to think about profit now. He had to get there as fast as possible. Within the next hour, a message would have been sent to the Cranel Familia, but it was essentially an empty house. That is, except for Seer. She'd received the note from the Adventurers Guild around 4 o'clock in the morning, detailing what had happened down in the dungeon from Fels, the one responsible for managing the Xenos. The letter had instructed the Cranel Familia to meet with Fels by the Adventurers Guild, but since everyone had left, there was no one to receive the message for him. She only hoped that Bell would be able to find Wiene before everything went wrong, hoping that she was alright. Seer clutched the letter, squeezing it, thinking about Bell. As deep within the dungeon, he'd be ripping hell through the floors, cutting down monsters in a scorched earth mentality, looking for any trace of a passage, any trace of Wiene or her friends. Bell's knife would slice through another monster, severing its head from its torso. Simultaneously, Lily Ruka would launch a bolt from her miniature armed crossbow, the bolt sinking deep into a rabbit monster's head and bursting against the walls another magic stone drops. Welf would cast Will-O-Wisp, causing the flames that were about to burst out of the mouth of a hellhound to implode, causing the creature to explode into smoke and wisps. And with it, Bell would be confused momentarily. Wait a minute, we can't be that far down yet. It's only the 8th floor. How are there hellhounds all the way up here? Bell's answer would come as they would reach the 17th floor, where he mentally had been prepared to fight the Goliath, only to turn around as he looks to see Titan standing with the Orb of Avarice. Oh, yeah. Crap, I totally forgot about that. Just making sure you guys are on your toes. Let's, keep going. Sound good? Essel would charge forward, a look of determination in her face, her eyes steely as she jumps down the slide to the next floor. Floor 18, the city of Rivera, the underground city mostly inhabited by adventurers. The city would be completely calm and quiet. Come on, let's get down to the 19th floor as soon as possible. There's no reason for us to stay up here. As soon as Bella and the others had reached down to the safe point, they continued trekking downward, making it down to the 19th, the 20th, the 21st floor. Bell would call forth all of his soldiers, calling forth over 100, no, almost 200 soldiers, as he calls for them to go and spread out and find them. As his shadow soldiers would take different directions heading down, he'd keep track of them, making sure none of them were using up magic power and sensing for them as best as he could while he cut down more. As for Belle's group, he'd make sure to stick together with Essel, Lily, and Wealth, making sure none of them were out of his sight to protect them. And also because he didn't want any of them getting lost if he did find Wiene. The soldiers would be easily returned to him, tracking through his magic power since he was so close now. There. He'd notice it. One of his groups, Vanity, his shadow soldiers squadron, would be getting taken out. Belle's heel would step on it as he tells everyone to follow him, leading them down the nearest passageway as he traces his own magic power, coming upon a group of monsters slaughtering his soldiers. Almost immediately, though, he'd begin hearing voices. Ah, damn it, these things just won't stay down! Belle would stop in his tracks. He had almost been about to cut off Gross's head. He turned, looking behind him, seeing Lida. Guys? The Xenos would turn, recognizing Belle and his party. Belchi? What's going on? Weren't you guys going back up to the surface? The Xenos would look confused. They hadn't heard anything about what was going on. Of course they hadn't. If it wasn't for Belle having placed a soldier on Wiene, they probably wouldn't have heard of the group being attacked until they had made it to their new hideout. Belle in a hurried voice would explain everything to Gross and the rest of the Xenos in this party. They'd be horrified, realizing that their comrades had been slaughtered, having been taken by adventurers. Gross would squeeze his hand tight as he turned back, looking at the others and nodding, saying they're gonna go raise hell on those damn adventurers. We'll burn that city of theirs to the ground, Gross would say, swiping his claws through the air. Belle would hold up his hand. Wiene isn't there. I already searched everywhere. It'd be a waste of time. How would you know that they just didn't get turned into magic crystals? If they'd been cut down, there'd be no trace of them anyway. Gross would be getting to get impatient. He wouldn't appreciate being attacked by the shadow soldiers from this human. Well, maybe not human, but whatever he was. He couldn't quite bring himself to feel as much aggression towards Bal Cranel. He didn't understand why, though. His instincts told him there was no point in attacking this person. None at all. Lily and Welf would have an expression of concern on their face, not wanting to get into a fight with the Xenos. Essa would pull her sword, drawing it as she points it down the dark passage, saying that they'll follow Belle's lead, and that they'll come with and will take down whoever abducted her. If you want to go and just cause trouble for humans. She'd turn her eyes purple, flicking out at Gross. Then that's your choice, but I'm here to save her. With that final note, she'd begin marching, with Belle holding his hand out. Essel, wait! We still have to... Never mind. Well, I gotta get to going too. I also don't have time to waste on this. I'm going to save Wiene. Are you all coming or not? Before the large stone gargoyle or the red lizard man could answer, we'd hear a squeal from Essel. Huh? Belle would turn, looking as he senses some strange magic power, strong enough to even fight with Essel? He'd run down the corridor, the Xenos and the rest of his party following behind, Egress right at his side. What are high orcs doing here? Essel would say, confused. Belle would turn, his eyes adjusting as he can see in the darkness. He'd see 3 of them. Large, burly monsters with tattoos covering their skin and deep fangs rising from their lower lip, reaching past their brows. As Essel would hold her sword drawn ready to fight, the 3 monsters would turn as more began to arrive. 10, 20, 30 high orcs, as Essel called them. Belle had never seen or heard of this monster before. What is a high orc? He'd heard of orcs, fairly weak monsters from the 10th to 12th floors, a huge pig-headed monster that can reach 3 meters in height. They wear old hide at waist like skirts, and were typically large and rotund. However, they were known to cause level 2 adventurers some struggle. These felt completely different. Their musculature, physique, and the aura emanating off them. It was stronger than anything that he had sensed yet. Maybe even on the level of something from the Demon King's castle. Welf and Lily would stop still, feeling sweat drip down their side of their face. They felt it too. They were nothing compared to these monsters. They're way too strong. Belle, do we have to fight that many? Belle's shadow soldiers would tighten in around them as they begin to fill the corridors. This isn't good. Bel's eyes would flick in a crimson light, glancing back toward his own party and toward the Xenos behind them, his soldiers filling in the cracks. There's far too many. And how are they so organized? Monsters don't operate like this inside of the dungeon. Bel would grip Kasuka's Venom Fang and the Night Killer in his hands, the two blades feeling cold and firm in his grip. As Essel was about to launch her first attack on the horde of monsters, their lips would open and they would begin to speak. We come on the orders of the great Kagalrin, the master of this dungeon and king of this land. The humans are to accompany us. You will assist us or you will perish. The High Orcs had been speaking, but their eyes didn't follow Essel or Bel. They looked past all of Bel's party actually, directly to the Xenos? What's going on? I thought Wiene and her party were captured by human adventurers. Have I miscalculated? And why? They're not Xenos. I've never heard of a monster called a High Orc before, but they must be. They're speaking like this. Did they come from a lower floor? Huh? What the hell are they saying? Huh? They're not speaking in the language from Orario. Then that must mean... Bel would look to Essel. Essel would turn back looking at Bel. The only two of them who had understood this questioning was themselves. Bel would sweep out his hand, turning back and telling them not to fight. They were leading them somewhere, to their leader. And he had a feeling that this was connected to what had happened to Wiene and the other Xenos. Meanwhile, on the outside, we'd see a conversation between the god Hermes and the god Ikelos. Can we just drop this by now? I've already told you there's no point in even talking to me, and I'm not going to say anything further. He'd push Hermes away. Hermes would slouch back around, leaning on his other side. Come on, Ikelos, we go way back, right? Come on, my guy. I know you can't be doing this to me. Where are they? You're a party of monster trackers. Come on, I know what you're doing down there, man. Don't make this any harder than it has to be. Do you know how much work I've given Asphy over the past week since our own little conversation? I said drop it already. If you're really so curious, I haven't heard from any of them since back then anyway. They're probably still locked down there in Knossos. What did you say? If anything, I said too much. I haven't heard from them in ages, so drop it. They probably died fighting a monster for all I care. Pathetic weaklings. If they come back, I'll teach them what they should do, ignoring my orders. Ikelos would stand as he then finally shakes off Hermes leaving, causing Hermes to feel confused. He had been certain that Ikelos' Familia had been responsible for the strange happenings in the dungeon, with monsters and adventurers going missing. What's going on? As Bel and his party would be led further inside the dungeon, they'd eventually come to a stone-sealed door. One of the orcs near the front would reach into their back of their pelt cloak, pulling out a strange item. He'd hold it up towards the door as the front door to Knossos would open to the key. Inside of Knossos, we would see hundreds of cages, and there'd be a mix of human adventurers, monsters, and some of the Xenos, but far worse than that. The moment the doors to Knossos opened, magic power would surge through, causing even Lily, Welf, and Essel to shiver, as Lily would begin shaking to her knees. She could barely move. Bel would narrow his eyes, looking into the room as he'd see even more High Orcs. Far more. Hundreds, if not at least 200-300 of them, all on the walls, cheering and laughing. At the far end of this massive cage of humans and monsters alike would be a giant High Orc, with skulls around its neck. Human skulls. Its teeth, its fangs were elongated, and it would have even more detailed tattoos on its red skin than the others. It truly had a fantastic aura. It was the strongest thing that Bel had seen so far, even including the Black Goliath from his fight earlier, a couple weeks ago back in Riveria. At what obviously seemed like the boss's side was another small cage, and inside would be a man. He'd be bloodied up and beaten, his eyes a scarlet red with a burning hatred in them. He'd scream up at the monster, "Do you know who I am? I'm Dix Paradix, goddammit, the strongest adventurer in all of the Ikelos Familia." The monster had grabbed a chain through the birdcage, pulling it tightly as Dix Paradix's neck would turn purple. He gets slammed against the cage. The monster would laugh, before speaking in the language of Orario.
You really think after I learned the language of you humans that I'd keep something so pathetic near my feet?
The king, Kagarin of the High Orcs, would rip his fist through the chain, pulling Dix up toward the top of the cage, his neck turning purple as he'd slam the cage against the ground. Dix would scream out in pain. Even being a high-level adventurer, he was no match for this High Orc.
You piece of shit monsters!
Dix would cough up blood, color beginning to return to his face, the cage now on its side indented. His eyes, with a red symbol, the symbol of Daedalus, burned into them, would rage into a flame.
It doesn't make any sense. My curse should work on you, the Phobiter Daedalus, but why can't I use it on him? This ugly fucking pig. See, this is why you survived so long, Dix Paradix. You were so entertaining. But...
Once again, Kagarin would reach forward and grab the chain, pulling the cage up as Bell and the others would now fully be in the center of the room. He'd turn, Bell's eyes would be cold watching this monster enjoy its sadism, torturing the man.
I have new toys to play with.
Kagarin with one hand would throw the cage with Dix inside of it, the leader of the Ikelos Familia screaming with his rasped and beaten voice, his blood spraying through the cage. As he'd be about to slam into the ground, Kagarin would raise his hand. As Paradix, the last of Daedalus' family, would fly through the air, his screams and outrage would activate his curse. The Xenos and monsters, even the other humans inside of the cages, the other adventurers from the Ikelos Familia, they'd cry out in pain, going into a frenzy. Bell would hear her voice screaming out in pain. He'd see her. Wiene would grab her chest, feeling the tight iron cord around her neck. The great shaman Kagarin's hand would reach out, as he'd cast gravitational magic. As the adventurer's body was about to get turned into a cheese grater through the metal grate, Bell would reach forward, speed blitzing past the armed guards of the High Orcs, the rest of his party, and the soldiers he had summoned. His hand reaching out and grabbing the cage, he'd rip open the bars, catching the adventurer, the blood spilling over his clothes. As he'd slow the fall, spinning and catching him, Bell would grit his teeth, looking up at the monster. How dare you make me save trash like that? In the next instant, Essel and Egris would have moved to Viene's cage, slicing open the chain and ripping the cage open as Wiene would lurch out, hugging around Essel and crying into tears, the curse having been deactivated when Dix Paradix had fallen unconscious. The other Xenos would begin speaking up, saying that it was him, that human and his friends, they had captured them.
Bell, Essel, Egris, Wolf, Lily.
With each name, we'd see more tears spill from Viene's eyes.
It was horrible. They killed everyone, the adventurers, but then they seemed surprised. They dragged me back here by my wing, and when we got in, that man seemed so terrified. There was this huge blue wall, and then the air ripped apart, and it was horrible.
The Xenos would turn on the humans still captured inside the cages, the Ikelos Familia members who had originally captured them, hoping to trap them and sell them off on the market. Gross would growl in a deep gravel voice.
We should just take them out while they're trapped in the cages.
Kagarin would laugh.
Yes, you understand. These...
He'd slam his foot down to another skeleton, a corpse of a human that had been devoured.
These humans need to know their place, thinking they can take on my power. Surely you must feel the same.
Bell would turn, narrowing his eyes. He'd stand, looking back towards Kagarin, as more of his shadow soldiers would appear, all 200 of his soldiers jumping out of his shadow and leaping forth, now surrounding everyone, the Xenos as well as the High Orcs close to them.
They may have been rotten pieces of shit, but I won't allow you to harm anyone else while I'm here.
He turned, his eyes purple, filled with malice. If any of the Xenos attack so much as one human, then I'll call you a monster and cut you down the same. Just sit still and watch, Gross. The gargoyle would be paralyzed, feeling fear enveloping him as Bell would turn back, His blades in his hand, he'd speed forward, beginning to cut through the high orcs, his shadow soldiers ripping up through them apart like cotton candy. Wiene would shiver in Essel's arms, as the rest of Bel's party could only stand and watch. Both Welf and Lily were completely still. Ygritte had already moved into battle formation, while the rest of his forces, Vanity and Titan included, had stood. This is when Kaghalrin would notice his forces.
Your pathetic scarecrows don't interest me. There must be a limit to your magic power. I'll keep slaughtering them with my army, and then I'll kill all the other humans here too, and I'll make sure you get to watch. That'll be my little treat for you since you interrupted my kill on that pathetic weakling.
I'm done talking. Titan, blast him away. With a roar of approval, the Black Goliath soldier of Bel Cranel would stand, holding the Orb of Avarice as it faces its contemporary. Letting out a breath of pure magical power, the Orb of Avarice would double its strength, as Kaghalrin would feel a light emerging upon him. He quickly shot out, holding his hand, his 4 bodyguards trying to get in front of the blast, as Kaghalrin would call the Hymn of Protection, creating a blue shield out of magic power, blocking the blast. Most of it. 3 of his generals would have been completely turned to dust, their bodies slumping over with just their hindquarters remaining. Bel would cringe, hoping he can still continue with his shadow extraction. Kaghalrin would roar out in anger. As more of the hierarchs would converge upon them, Welf would snap back into it, using Will-o'-the-Wisp to try and block the next hymn from Kaghalrin. However, he'd cast Hymn of Blindness, casting a curse upon Bel's party. Welf would clasp his hands around his eyes. I can't see a thing. Lily would have dodged out of the way with the help of a shadow soldier who would have taken the attack, being completely unaffected by the curse. Looks like he's okay. I should be able to help him out later. For now. Bel would turn back, seeing that his soldiers had been getting cut down and he was losing magic power. System. At that moment, the system screen would roar to life, showing Bel's stats and strength. He was level 94. His stats were in the hundreds, and he was ready to fight. Alright, Gargle, or whatever your name is. Let's do this. A shower of blood and sparks would rain. As the monsters from the Xenos would begin freeing each other, even the humans, they'd watch in horror as the Shadow Army would rip through Kaghalrin's forces, watching as the Hierarchs would fall. But there were just too many of them. They kept cutting down his soldiers, and Bel would have to keep using his system to drain more mana potions. You know, Kaggle, this is really a poor matchup. For you.
What are you even talking about? A poor matchup for me? My soldiers are greater in quantity and quality. Your dolls are falling like flies to a flame.
Then I guess I'll have to show you the strength of a necromancer. I wonder how many I've cut down by now. Let's see.
Onwards.
The shadows of the fallen would swirl, as the High Orc's bodies would reform through his power, through the might of the Shadow Monarch. At his beck and call, he decides who rises back to the world of the living, who bears their arms in his name. His army would double, no, triple in size.
You dare turn my soldiers into your puppets?
Yeah, I do. But don't worry, you'll be joining them soon enough.
Hymn of Dragonfire!
Kaghalrin's hood would change, its form shaping into that of the maw of a dragon. Bel would smirk. I kill dragons. As the flame would burst toward him, he'd hold his hand out, protecting his party, and the other Xenos behind him. Ruler's hand. Catching the flame in the air, he'd defend everyone behind him, causing the flames to burn to the side, creating a tower of the shape of a hand in the air. Bel would lunge to the side, jumping to the wall and grabbing onto the cages. He'd sever the cage hanging from the ceiling as he climbs up to the chain, cutting it with his other blade, the Night Killer. He'd bring the chain down with him as he runs toward Kaghalrin's feet, who'd be screaming. Bel would interweave between his feet, tying him up as he then pushes his knee out from under him, leaping off from the ground and headbutting him into his giant knee. Titan would lunge forward, making a huge roaring sound, throwing a fist down on top of the head in a skullhammer smash with both fists clasped. Kaghalrin would go flimp to the ground, As he'd begin to try and pull himself up, he'd begin casting curses toward Bell.
Him of blindness, him of pain, him of agony.
3 discs would begin to spin around Bell of magic power. They would shatter in an instant, and next to Bell, the system would roar to life.
Activated blessing of great spellcaster Kandiaru. All curses, poisons, and negative status effects are nullified.
I said we were a bad matchup. Did I not mention that I'm resistant to poison? It slips my mind. With Titan on top pinning the massive Hierarch to the ground, Bell would lunge forward with Kasuka's Venom Fang, jabbing it into his eye, as Kagaran would scream out in pain, blood splurting over the floor of Kenosis. At the same time, the stone doors that enter into this man-made labyrinth would begin to open. The monsters who had been freed, the Xenos, and even the humans from Ikelos Familia, will begin to remove themselves from their bindings. As the Xenos would try and hold them back, we'd see them going into a frenzy. As the leader of the Ikelos Familia, Dix Paradix would stand. His body bruised, his bones cracked. He began dragging himself up, his eyes burning with a flame, as he caused everything to go into a frenzy. Kagaran would take advantage of the distraction, taking a swing at Bell. Bell would raise his arm, blocking, as he gets sent flying into the stone wall, cracking it. The Xenos would begin losing control of themselves, as Wealth, Lily, and Essel would have to get away from Wiene and the others. Wiene would begin lashing out, her wings growing in size, as the gem in her forehead would begin to crack and fall off, Essel catching it, as she'd see Wiene grow into her full Vivier form. She begins screeching out, her claws reaching in pain. As she'd scream Bell's name, Bell would turn, jumping off the wall, as he says, "Damn it! What did you do? Dix Paradix!"
That should buy me a distraction. I'll get out of here before the orphan or this damn monster nest can catch me again.
Using the Xenos and the monsters, as well as the rest of the Ikelos Familia who could still stand and move, they would escape through the doors, using the confusion to get out of the way so that Bell's Shadow Army and the High Orcs couldn't follow them. They'd try to close the door after, beginning to completely shut it, as Bell would scream out, saying, "No!" Elsa would stab her blade back into the ground, saying she couldn't save her, as the rest of Bell's party would turn back to the fight, cutting down more High Orcs, saying they'll go after them. We need to get this cleaned up first.
You're right. Dash!
Bell's speed would go up 50%. He'd lunge off the wall as if the wind was at his feet, stabbing both of his daggers directly back into Kagaran's head. Bell would begin scaling the side of his head, going up towards his spine, using Fatal Strike, Fatal Strike, Fatal Strike! With each cast of his attack, he'd begin carving deeper into his flesh as the giant Hierarch would scream in pain. Titan would come down with another uppercut, punching the giant Hierarch and shattering its teeth, its fangs shattering to the ground. The 2 tusks it was so proud of turning to dust on the stone floor of the man-made dungeon it had claimed as its territory. As Bell begins running down the side of its spine, he'd scream out using both daggers and spinning like a blade, cutting directly down Kagaran's back until he had reached the chains he had tied around his legs. With one hand, he'd grab the chain, pulling it back up towards his head and begin wrapping it around before using Ruler's hand to throw the edge of the chain back up to Titan. He'd scream out, "Titan, pull!" And with that, he'd grab down onto Kagaran's foot, bracing his body as himself and Titan would begin playing tug of war with Kagaran. With one final roar of pain, Bell would feel the snapping sound of his leg being separated from his torso, as Titan would have ripped off using the chain the remainder of Kagaran's face and his head. The system would roar to life in Bell's perspective. You have defeated the dungeon boss. The gate will now be closed. Huh? The gate? Just like the portal that had opened in the side of the dungeon's wall before, when he had entered that strange space to fight Kasuka, the Venom Snake, he turned, seeing the blue light that had been filling the room before, slowly vanishing. Wait, that entire wall of light? I thought that was part of the dungeon. That was a gate? It was massive, but I never used a key. Why was there a gate here? Never mind, we don't have time. Well, Lily, are you guys alright? Essel! He'd head back over to his party, where Egress would be standing nearby. watching over Essel, who be sank to her knees. They got away, and I lost her. Belle, I'm so sorry. Essel would now clench her fists as she stands back up, saying, "We need to go after them." "Yeah, I should have put one of my soldiers inside of Dix Paradix's shadow. That was a mistake. I thought he was unconscious. I can't believe he recovered that quickly, though." "Oh, but before we leave," Belle would turn back. "You guys go on ahead. I gotta try something." He'd reach forward, getting back to the bodies of where the guards, as well as Kagalran, had been now laid. "Titan, you might have to share that now." He'd point at the Orb of Avarice in his hand. He'd turn back, saying, "Onwards." And with that, the soldiers would rise, gathering the rest of the High Orcs he had not captured before. With them completely being wiped out now, his forces would be quadrupled in size. He'd add them to his collection, deciding on a name for this new commander-ranked shadow. A general, huh? I guess I should just give you your own name? Gaggle, He'd look around, seeing the dropped fang, the shattered bone that Titan had ripped off of him when he was alive. Let's go with Tusk. Yeah, that sounds good. You were pretty proud of them after all. How about Tusk? And with that, the shadows would rise, and with it, he would now have 2 giant shadow soldiers. Titan would gratefully hold the Orb of Avarice, pulling it away from him, as we'd see Belle giving him a "come on, hand it over" look. Igris could be visibly sighing in the background. Finally, Titan would give over the Orb of Avarice to Tusk. Tusk would turn back, looking toward the door, as Belle would tell everyone to get out of the way, his party moving with his soldiers, his shadow soldiers re-emerging back into his shadow. "I won't let this door stop me. If we don't have the key, then I'll make my own way out." He'd order him to use the Hymn of Dragonfire, the blast that he had used to try and attack him earlier when he was alive. Tusk would oblige, the magic pouring forward through the Orb of Avarice and doubling in strength, until it eventually ripped forward at a blinding speed and crashed into the wall, where it did nothing. The wall would be completely scorched, flames licking the stone, but the wall would be almost completely undamaged, with only a few crumbs of the stone being destroyed. Not even that was enough to blow through it? Damn. He looked to Titan, wondering if maybe Titan's breath attack might be strong enough, but... Alright guys, you try pulling it. He'd have both of them stand on one side, begin pulling on the doors, but they wouldn't budge. Yep, that's some Daedalus craft work, alright. Wolf would speak up, asking if maybe there's another door or some way to get out of here that was left unlocked. Maybe. Vanity, go take a look of a squadron around. Don't go too far though, there might be some other enemies. With that, Welf would join Vanity's group as they began looking for another entrance. It's fine. I know I can get through this. He'd punch the stone, feeling it shake under his fist. It was not indestructible. It was merely strong stone. But was it stronger than he was? He doubted that. He'd tell the 2 Titans to stop fighting, with both of them now getting into an argument with the other, thinking that the newbie wasn't trying hard enough. Titan would shrug. Belle would sigh, motioning to Tusk to drop the Orb of Avarice for him. Immediately, Tusk would reach down, handing the orb back to Belle. It would shrink to his size. Belle would take a step back, taking 10 steps from the door. No, 20. He'd begin to concentrate, holding his fist around the orb, telling them to get back into his shadow. Lily, Essel, keep watch over me for the next 10 minutes. I'll get us out of here in no time. And with that, Belle would begin charging, using the Orb of Avarice as the center of the recipient of magic. He had a crazy idea. If the Orb of Avarice can multiply magic power that's run through it, like fireball attacks and spells, what's to say that it can't multiply my skill's power? And so, Belle would take advantage of the Argonaut skill, blue sparks beginning to fill the orb as the red Orb of Avarice over the next several minutes would turn a blindingly blue light, and then pure white, like holding a miniature star. He'd breathe in and out, feeling the depth of the magic power growing. Essel and Lily would be watching with their mouths hanging open agape. Watching so much magic power exuding from the Orb of Avarice, Belle was worried that it might break. That's all that I can go with. I can't use any more magic than this or I'll get worried. The hand that he was holding with the Orb of Avarice would begin to vibrate. The amount of magic that he had used charging into Argonaut into the Orb of Avarice to enchant it was multiplying its effect of doubling magic power by over 100. That's right, even by only spending 7 minutes charging it, Belle would have given it enough power with Argonaut to change the multiplicative power of the Orb of Avarice from 2 times the attack potency to 100 times. Belle would hold his hand out, telling the 2 girls to get behind him and stay back as he'd hold his hand toward the door. He'd feel the magic waiting to explode out, like a bomb waiting to burst. And then he'd say the word. Firebolt. Immediately, unlike any firebolt he had ever cast before, the blast would be wide and powerful, a white flame exploding out of the Orb of Avarice like a hydraulic pump of flames. The beam of pure energy of magic power created would dwarf both Titan and Tusk's power. The shadows watching within their master's shadow would be impressed seeing his magic power melt through the stone doors of Kenosis, leaving a massive hole as it would rip past it into the dungeon wall. Several more layers of the dungeon would get evaporated from the magical power. Belle would watch as the empty corridor behind would be completely turned to black, the stone charcoal turning to dust and ash, burning away, being completely vaporized as he'd melt through the 2 layers of the dungeon wall right outside, taking them right back to the center of the floor they had walked from to get there. Belle would turn back to the others, calling for Vanity and Wealth, who would come running, seeing the door was now open. Belle would look down at his hand, seeing it was smoking. He'd start waving it quickly, throwing the Orb of Avarice back into his inventory, making sure that it had no durability damage. It was perfectly fine. It had been able to contain all of his magic power just like that. His hand would be okay too, just hot. I actually didn't know if that was going to work. I thought about it, but holy crap. That I'm going to have to be careful with. Well, let's get out of here. And with that, Belle's party would chase up after the monsters and Xenos that had reached up to the surface, according to Dick's Paradox. Yet they did not come across him at all. We take a look back into the past. About 20 minutes ago, before Belle and the others had managed to escape Kenosis using Belle's power of the enhanced Firebolt and Orb of Avarice combined with Argonaut, we'd see Dick's Paradox resealing the stone wall, laughing as the monsters would go haywire, making their way up towards the ceiling of the dungeon and getting out into Orario, causing a distraction. I'll just lay low down here. There's another passageway I can use this key to get out of. He turned the opposite direction, running down the hall and descending another 2 floors. Using the dungeon wall with his map in his mind, he'd open the door. Falling into the passageway and closing it behind him, he'd begin pulling himself slowly, feeling the withering and the pain from all the damage that damn orc had done to him. As he lurched, pulling himself along, he'd finally come to a stop, feeling something warm. What? Dick's Paradox would look to the ceiling, where he'd see the cold breath and horns of a monster. The Minotaur would howl, bringing down an axe upon the human before him, cutting him down. Asterius the Minotaur had arrived. Meanwhile, Belle's party would have finally returned to reaching the surface. With them chasing after the Xenos, they wouldn't have been able to catch up in time with a 20-minute lead. Getting past Riveria and back up to the surface of the dungeon, they'd hear screams, seeing as Orario was in a panic. Adventurers would begin lurching out of the houses, trying to attack and take down the monsters. Damn it! Belle would call forth his shadow soldiers, telling them to defend the Xenos and make sure to incapacitate them, saying to do their best to get them into an alleyway, lead them towards Daedalus Street. With that in mind, Belle would begin chasing after Wiene himself, using his soldiers to scan through the city and prevent the other adventurers from slaughtering them. They don't understand. The guild would have already called in the Ganesha and Hermes Familia to prepare a strike force, believing that Belle had met up with Fells due to the letter. That assumption, though, would prove incorrect. The Hermes and Ganesha Familias would try their best to make the situation uncontrolled, but Loki's Familia would hear about it, heading toward Daedalus Street to take out the Vivier and the other monsters like a gargoyle that had been attacking human civilians. Eyes Wallenstein, Tiona and her sister Tione, Beta, and of course the 3 level 6s of the Loki Familia, the top executives, Gareth, Finn, and Riveria. The High Elf, the Dwarf, and the Purum. With these 3 out in the city now, it was only a matter of time before people, well, Xenos started to get hurt. Bell would tell Welf and Lee to head back to the Familia base, telling them to get back to the mansion and get out of the streets. He couldn't watch them and also fight at full capacity. If I'm taking on 3 level 6s, things are gonna get messy. Not to mention Eyes. Essel, come help me save her. She'd smile, swinging her sword down as the two would continue running toward Daedalus Street, Bell using Ruler's hand to pull them over houses as the Shadow Soldiers would continue to spread out, stopping the adventurers from cutting down the Xenos, even successfully capturing a few and dragging them into the back alleys, holding them down. Bell would continue to use his soldiers in this method, using the High Orcs he had just received to their fullest potential. With their incredible strength and power, they were more than a match for most of the Xenos. It was only a matter of time. Yes, only a matter of time. But he'd see it, as Wiene was about to be cut down by Eyes Wallenstein. As her blade went to cut Wiene down, the sound of metal on metal, sparks would fly, as the Night Killer would block her aerial strike. Bell would stand before her, blocking her blade from attacking Wiene. Essel would appear behind him, now holding her sword up, as Bell would look around, analyzing who else was there. Bede, Tiona, level 5s. This won't be easy. Essel, get on my right side. He'd call out calmly. Eyes would narrow her own eyes, telling to step aside. That's a monster. I will end it. Now move. She'd push with more force this time, but Bell wouldn't even budge. He was stronger than when they had last sparred. Bell would bring up his other hand, summoning Kasuka's Venom Thing from behind his back, trying to use a sword break technique. Eyes would quickly repel backward, now pulling out of the blow, as we see Bede, Tiona, and the rest of the Loki Familia on site, glaring at Bell. What, so you like monsters now, huh? Bede would say. Essel would raise her sword, saying to shut up, raising her sword at him. You think you can threaten me, huh? Damn elf, the Beastkin would say. Essel would retort, I won't allow you to hurt someone so important to my prey, Bell would say, his eyes shifted from a crimson red to a blazing blue. He'd look down Eyes Wallenstein. This is my prey. I've been chasing it since it escaped the dungeon. Surely experienced adventurers such as you all know about how hunting rights work from the dungeon. Isn't that right? The air would be so thick you could cut it with a knife. As Bell stood, the monster behind him writhed. Bell would speak in his mind, hoping, come on, just give it up already. You don't want to fight me over this. Eyes would speak first. In normal circumstances, perhaps. But this monster got out of your sight and started attacking civilians, which means it's my priority as an adventurer to cut it down. Now then, step aside or get rid of it. In the time you've wasted, you would have already killed it by now. Am I wrong? Bell's eyes would narrow. Don't. Immediately, Eyes would lunge with aerial activated, fully intending to strike at Viene's magic stone. Beta and Tiona would jump at the same time, all 3 of them moving down, bearing down on Bell and Wiene. Essel would stand in the way of Bede, swinging her sword as he kicks her sword to the side, aiming for another blow to her head. Simultaneously at this moment, Bell would flick his fingers, using Ruler's hand as he pushes Bede back from Essel so he can't strike her, stopping his foot midair and throwing him into Tione. The 2 level 5 adventurers getting thrown with a flick of his wrist. Essel would come up behind Eyes, preparing to strike her from the back. With one hand, he'd catch Essel's blade, stopping her. As he turned back, looking toward Wiene and Eyes, Eyes would continue barreling past him. I can't allow that. The longer this fight drags on, the system notification will roar to life. Hostility is detected toward the player. The worse this will get. In a single flash of an instant, before Eyes or Essel could recognize what was going on, with a single open hand, he would have removed his other Kasuka's Venom Thing and put it back in his inventory. A swift chop to the neck would knock Eyes unconscious, slamming her into the ground as he would have single-handedly taken out all 3 of the level 5 adventurers. As soon as he turned back to Wiene, who would start to be mumbling his name, he'd hear a slamming into the ground behind him. Gareth, the level 6 adventurer, would appear. And at his side would be Finn. 2 level 6s? Belle's eyes would narrow. He'd summon forth his shadow army, beginning to surround the entire square, making sure there were no civilians around. This could get messy. Hey, Essel, maybe back up here. As she began to try and back up, Flynn would move at blinding speed, but Belle's eyes would track him fully. Both of them were far within his range of power now. Belle would appear, grabbing Flynn's spear as he holds it away from Essel's face. I know this looks bad, but all 3 of them are fine. I swear, they're just unconscious. A swipe of stone would reach out, piercing through Belle's armor as he'd feel a gash across his right chest. The stone would be from Gareth, who'd laugh as he roars, saying, "You better hope that they're alright," as the second level 6 would come bearing down, trying to cut down on Belle's shoulder. He'd vanish, disappearing like an assassin, using stealth as he grabs Essel and hightails it out of there. They'd turn back, looking to where he had gone, when an explosion of stone could be heard. Wiene, Belle, and Essel would be gone. Eyes would be pulled out of the way by Flynn, thrown toward Tione and Beta, as the stone shattering would not be from Belle Cranel. No, it was a monster, a minotaur far fiercer than the Vivier they had been promised. Meanwhile, Belle and Stealth had grabbed Wiene and Essel by the neck, pulling them haphazardly along the road, trying to get out of there as he felt blood on his torso. Damn it. Full recovery. He'd use his full heal from his daily quest, healing his wounds and giving him his stamina back. Once he had run far enough, getting out of the way of the attack, he had sensed a powerful strike of an attack. The magic had reverberated all the way out here. Who could that even be? It's not the same energy I felt back at the Pleasure Ward a few weeks ago. The energy from back then was far more dangerous. What could this be then? A monster? No. Another Xenos? But which one would be powerful enough to hold off 2 level 6s? Fine. Anyway, he called forth his shadow army. Everyone, all of my squadrons. I need to recombine with them. Let's get going. Essel would be caring for Wiene, pressing the gemstone back on her head as her body would begin to shrink. Belle had made it in time. The degeneration to her form wasn't anything he couldn't fix with the system shop, passing a bottle of healing potion and pouring it down her throat. With this, she'd begin coughing, but still would be unconscious. She's fine. Moving on, he'd go to meet up with the rest of his army, with them carrying various other Xenos who were also unconscious, now with the effects of the curse having fully passed. Belle would heal them as much as he can with health potions, spending hundreds of gold, and finally making it down to under the Colosseum, a space owned by the Xenos Familia but currently abandoned right now, as they were still searching the city. This is when we'd hear a familiar voice. Ah, Cranel. Excellent work, you brought them all here. Fantastic. He turned, seeing Fells, the mage who was under the black cloak. Huh? How did you find me? And were you being followed? Fells would laugh, saying that thanks to the Xenos, many of them have tracking items that he's been using to assist the god Oranos with helping them through the dungeon. Ah, gotcha. Have there been any casualties? Unfortunately, there was just too many who had been escaped into the city. Even though it was so early in the morning, there were so many adventurers heading to the dungeon that, well, some of the Xenos were lost. I tried my best. I'm sorry. The Xenos who had regained consciousness would support Belle and Fells, thanking them for all their help. Belle would shake his head, saying he hadn't done enough, apologizing for only having provided one guard for Wiene. He really hadn't expected them to be attacked so soon after departing. Fells would then explain to Belle what all had happened while he was underground, telling him about the letter to the Cranel Familia, the hostess girl's reply, as well as what the other guilds are up to. With the Ganesha and Hermes Familia being in on the Xenos secret, they now had 3 Familia working on the guild side, to protect them. Ganesha Familia was already now aware that the Xenos were underneath their Colosseum, and were beginning to rope it off from other adventurers and other people from the city. Since your summons are so conspicuous, we've had to have some pretty crazy excuses, like you were creating new ones or something. Huh? They're gonna think I'm totally irresponsible, won't they? Belle would say. Fells would laugh. Yes. Well, the guild will charge you a fee, but we'll cover it. Especially after the truth comes out, now that we've captured some of the Ikelos Familia on their monster ring. Speaking of monsters, was there another Xenos that came out to the surface? One that wasn't captured by the Ikelos Familia and the High Orc? Fells would be confused. What are you talking about? Huh? There were some monsters called High Orcs that had attacked us inside the dungeon. They had taken over the Ikelos Familia's base and were torturing them alongside the Xenos. I took them down, but, well, I still don't know exactly where they came from. He would lie. Fells would be silent for a moment. I've never heard of such a monster before. It's possible that they had come from the deeper floors. Monsters with cruelty and intelligence. Are you sure that you weren't attacking other Xenos, perhaps newly born ones? Fells would be conflicted. No, it was one monster that was controlling the others, hundreds of them. They look like this. He'd snap his fingers as his shadow soldier would materialize. It would be one of the High Orc guards that Kagalrin had before he was turned into a shadow. Fells would look at the markings and the strange skin. I've never seen a monster like this before. Are you sure this came from inside the dungeon? Belle would immediately answer, yes, it did. You can ask any of the Xenos here too. Isn't that right? Lid would nod. They were inside the Knossos place where all of these humans were too. I don't know how they got in there, but apparently they'd taken over everything. At the very least, it seems Wiene is one of the only ones who recognized they had teleported in through that back wall. That's good. I don't want more panic to spread, but I really should figure out why there's new monsters spawning inside the dungeon. In the following nights, it would be much easier for Belle to help him remove the Xenos back to the dungeon. Using his own ability of stealth, he could easily check all the locations without being detected from any of the Loki Familia or the other Familia standing guard of the Gnosis locations that had been blown open by any of the survivors from the Ikelos Familia trying to escape them. Belle would have found his target. The least protected of the entrances to Knossos would be guarded by Lafia, a relatively new member of the Loki Familia. He'd sneak up behind her before covering her mouth and quickly knocking her out. With this, he'd leave her in a safe location before calling the rest of the Xenos and taking them underground. By repeating this process, he would have successfully helped Fells and Ganesha and Hermes Familia in saving the Xenos, returning them back underground with almost zero resistance. However, the nagging feeling in the back of his mind about that strange magic power, and the desire he had to fight it again, it was something that would stay with him for a while, that's for sure. He had heard from Lid after. That apparently was one of the oddest Xenos he knew. A Xenos who went down deeper into the dungeon than anyone to train. Sounds like a guy I'd get along with. Belle would successfully say goodbye to Wiene this time, with the Xenos leaving together. He'd feel uneasy leaving 2 High Orcs with her this time, promising that it won't be repeated. He won't allow this to ever happen again. And so the Cranel Familia would successfully say goodbye, taking one last hug from Wiene, now slowly fading back into their daily lives. Although the rumors about the orphan were just as odd and varied as usual, with some claiming that he mind-controlled monsters in order to make them his summons. Some rumors had been going around that he had taken out Eyes Wallenstein, the Sword Princess. She hadn't been seen recently at all. Something was going on there for sure too. And worst of all was Hermes, who kept coming by bugging Belle to change his reputation, saying that he's ruining his heroic good looks, now trying to touch him on the face. Duh, Hermes, come on. I already said that I don't care what they say. It doesn't matter what you don't care about. It matters about your reputation, come on. They think you're some sort of weirdo. They already started thinking that when I started having monsters in my familia. Didn't you know about that? That is this, and this is that, okay? We don't need to talk about that now, okay, Belle? I'm just trying to help you out. What can I say? Alright, well, I'll leave today, but, you know, if you're ever in a pinch, just let me know. I'd set you up to look real heroic. Yeah, I'm sure you would. You and your schemes. I know you were working in the background. Thanks for saving me from Ikelos, though. Not sure why he was so keen on interrogating me. Hermes would smile. Well, it's because when mortals lie to gods, we clearly know it. Here, give it a shot. Belle would smirk. Hermes, you are my best friend. Hermes would stand still looking at him. Wow, you really do feel that way about me. What a nice guy. Well, you're supposed to lie, but I guess I'll just take a compliment. Well, Belle, it's been great, but I really should get going. Asfi's waiting for me, and we have a new hot spring to check out. Adios. And so he'd vanish, thinking Belle had been playing around with him. Belle would just stand still. He realized how stupid this all was. Hermes could totally just have been lying about that. Whatever. Not like I care anyway. Who cares if the Divine can see if I'm lying to them? Or can they? The monsters don't seem to think of me as a human. I wonder if that's true for the gods too. These questions would swirl within Belle, as Seer would have given him a huge hug and asked if he'd eaten anything, having it only been like 6 hours since he had left in the morning. Hey Seer, can you give the nagging thing a break? I'm totally exhausted. Only if you let me tuck you in. And with that, Belle and Seer's routine would continue as normal. Well, as normal as things could be. Elsewhere in the world, things were changing. Drastic changes. Deep on the 40th floor, in the deep levels of the dungeon of Orario, we hear scraw, chomping, ripping of flesh. The powerful monsters of the deep floors with their cunning and ability would be getting ripped apart. The creature's shell would shiver. Quite tasty, but not nearly as good as that human adventurer. There's more on the surface. We must continue climbing out of this bottomless pit. The creature would stand, its black shell curling around it. Its magical power, its aura would fill the dungeon with anguish. The monsters of the deep floors would cower from it. A powerful ant-like monster that this world had never seen. Circling with their antennae were other creatures with 6 legs and shell-like bodies. These ants, though, they had differences from the killer ant of the higher floors of the dungeon. They devoured with greatness and produced outside of the dungeon. Instead of spawning through the walls of the dungeon like most monsters, these ants began to lay eggs in the deep floors, creating more of their kind, updating their abilities and stats, and growing stronger with each generation. Their power would slowly begin to accumulate. The king of the ants would make a loud scraw, telling its prey that it was coming. It was coming for their king. And with that, that will bring us to an end tonight for What If Belle Had Soul Leveling, Level 9. If you guys are looking forward to Level 10, make sure to keep showing the support, pressing all the cool buttons down there like I said at the beginning of the video, and, just staying here and watching. Thank you so much. And if you guys are looking forward to the next part, you won't have to wait as long, not 4 months this time. I already have the script done for the next arc of Danmachi, now focusing on the Dungeon Calamity arc / the Ryu and Ikelos arc, which will be wrapping up some of the threads of stuff with the Ikelos Familia, as well as this new antagonist, the King of the Ants, now living deep within the dungeon. What's exactly going on here? How are monsters from soul leveling appearing in the world of Danmachi? And what exactly is going on with the gates? Why are they only appearing inside the dungeon and not outside in the world of Orario? Interesting questions, interesting. But if you guys are looking forward to that, you'll have to continue watching because we are slowly reaching the end of this story with only 2-3 more parts left max. I'm super excited to get to the end of this story and show you guys what I've been cooking up with the final arc and all the villains and everything coming together. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.